So this right here is quickly becoming my favorite budget color film. This is Kodak Colorplus 200, and decided to wake up very early this morning, a couple hours ago, about 5 a.m. and make the drive down here to the south coast in England to spend the day with a few rolls of this, making some photos along the coast. So this is a film that over the last 6 months I've shot a handful of rolls, and previously to that I'd never actually worked with it before. You know, not shooting a ton of 35, didn't really have a purpose for it. But I bought some on a whim to go on vacation with family, you know, pair up with an automatic camera like this, which I'll talk about after. And when I developed and scanned it afterwards, I actually really enjoyed the look. You know, it's a film that's been around for a long time. It's got a pretty classic look to it. And in the next couple months, I'm planning out some long distance hikes here in the UK, want to photograph the trips. Thought it'd be nice to kind of switch it up and shoot some 35, camera like this, budget film, and yeah, nice kind of departure from my typical way of working with medium and large format. So plan today is just to get out and shoot a few more rolls of this, you know, outside of family stuff, keep it super loose and relaxed down here on the coast, and just get a feel for how this stuff looks and what it's like to work with. Starting here this morning, beautiful spot here, and then gonna pick along the coast, see what else we find, and just have some fun. So if you're not familiar, Kodak Colorplus was released back in the early 2000s, but it's actually a descendant of the Kodacolor films, which I think came out in the early 70s. And when you open up the package, the film cassette actually still says Kodacolor on it. So this is definitely one of, if not the oldest emulsion that Kodak sells. And I would describe it as having just like a very classic consumer film look. Of course, this is just all gonna come down to how you scan it and edit it afterwards. And for me, that's kind of the appeal, is to just switch it up and use something completely different than what I typically work with. And so far, I've really enjoyed how it looks. Price-wise, cheapest I could find here in the UK is £8 per roll. That's if you buy a 10-pack of 36 exposure rolls. So close, I would say, to Gold 200 and Ultramax, maybe a little bit cheaper, but overall I'd say it's probably the cheapest color negative film you're going to find, especially from a manufacturer like Kodak. So up until this point, I'd only worked with this film in overcast conditions, and it was interesting to see these initial results, obviously in bright daylight, scanned with the Fuji Frontier afterwards. You know, they're definitely punchy and very contrasty, and at first I kind of had mixed feelings on how this looked. Love scenes like this. So many things just packed in this one little area. You know, it wasn't until later in the day when I went to some different locations where the environment changed a little bit, and also when the light started to get softer, that I started to, I would say, really enjoy this. But this first location, these first results, yeah, mixed feelings. Gonna be out of film quick today. So that is one roll down, and that happened pretty quick. I'm just in my second location here. I think this place is called West Bay. So we'll load up another roll. Lots to see here. It's funny, this Canon I'm shooting with, which we'll talk about in a second, is so whisper quiet. It's like, didn't even hear it finish or rewind. Good to go. Honestly, for whatever reason today, there's just all sorts of interesting things I'm seeing. Like I said, it's a nice change. This coastline here is just so dramatic. The Jurassic Coast, I think it's called. The cliffs are just incredible. Love these shadows here. They're being cast from the concrete pillars. All right, let's see what else is in this town. So we'll take a look at some more of the results in just a second, but have to take a quick break to talk about the sponsor today, which is Squarespace. So as a photographer, Squarespace has been such a helpful tool over the years. It gives me a way to make a nice professional looking website and keep it up to date very easily. For example, they have things like their blueprint builder, which lets you build your site from scratch, but also gives you helpful tools like different layout options or font pairings and color palettes. But then also just things like adding a gallery or updating one. You can click and drag to rearrange or reorder images to play with sequencing, easily change image sizes, add thumbnails, and then even do things like add an online store if you want to sell books, prints, and other things like that. So check out squarespace.com today, sign up for a free trial, test it out, and when you're ready to launch, you can use my link below to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. So it's funny with these kind of newer film cameras, like the Canon EOS versions, are obviously not as popular as like, an old mechanical camera. Doesn't have that same charm, but from a usability standpoint, I mean, they're definitely, I'd say, better. All these auto functions, like I mentioned, this one has auto wind. It has a really great evaluative metering system. And then I bought it with this 40mm pancake. Originally, I wanted to get like a nice point and shoot, but I couldn't justify spending like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds on a fancy point and shoot. So I made this my point and shoot. And so far it's been great to use. Yeah, it doesn't have the charm same as the Contax RTS I use, but to just get out and shoot and make images, it's really good. So I think that's enough from this town. Time to move on to one last spot, one last roll of film. All right, out of the final spot, a place called Lyme Regis. This was kind of top of my list. I came here a couple years ago on the way back from a vacation, shot for an hour or two and really liked it. There's this break wall here in the harbor where people walk along the top of it and kind of silhouette against the sky. So yeah, a lot of opportunity here. I'll be honest, I'm struggling a bit though. I think it's probably just lack of energy because, getting near the end of the day, early morning, shot a lot actually at the first two spots, almost 2 rolls of film by 2 p.m., which for me is kind of record setting. So yeah, I think I'll wrap things up here, but overall I think I'm happy with what I got and just a fun day of photography. I got to get out and do this more. Just, no plans or expectations, step away from the project stuff from time to time and just go out and like do photography because it's fun. Obviously a super important thing as well. So this was good, but wrap it up here. I'm gonna wander, make a few more images, use the rest of this light, and then maybe jump back in the office, do a bit of a deeper dive, and share some final thoughts on Colorplus 200. This will be an interesting test. The light is pretty intense, heavily backlit. So we'll see how this holds up, but I love the people, like I said, walking along that break wall. So after this, I decided to jump in the car and I actually headed back to West Bay to just catch the very last bit of light. And this is actually where I made some of my favorite images from the day. Like I said earlier, it was when the light started to get lower and softer that I found myself really enjoying this film quite a bit. Okay, so I just wanted to jump on the computer here quickly now that I've kind of had some time with these results and just give a little bit of a wrap up here. But like I said, multiple times throughout the video, the initial images at the start of the day when it was like bright sunlight out, I'm actually not a huge fan of how these look. They're pretty contrasty, which I actually don't mind. The Frontier is a pretty contrasty scanner to begin with, especially with smaller formats, but even with something like a Portra,
So I don't actually mind the contrast too much. It is quite harsh, but just the, the greens are very yellowy in this bright sunlight, and yeah, it's not bad, but up until, I made these images, all the times I'd used this in the past was in overcast weather, and I loved how it looked. So, to see this drastic change, I was like, I don't actually know how much I like this. This one actually isn't bad. Still, those greens, are kind of yellowy. I actually like how the contrast came across here. Some situations like this, it certainly gives you a distinct look. I actually like how this looks. And even something like this. But it wasn't until, like I said, later in the day when the light got soft. This is when I really like this film the most. Specifically, again, I've said these reds, I like how they come across with the Frontier as well. Super punchy. These greens now in the softer light seem to come across more, like a lot more cool, which I enjoy quite a bit. But again, this scene, obviously there's still bright daylight out here, but this is all in open shade. I love how these reds look. So yeah, overcast light, twilight, for me, this is where I could see myself using this quite a bit moving forward. Even this one, end of day, this is super harsh, shooting right into the sun, but crushing the shadows. I like how this looks as well. So yeah, it, to me, reminds me of this, like, classic consumer film look. Like I said, I know that's kind of a vague description, but this is what I think of. And it's fun to switch it up and use something like this. And then I actually have some random frames here, but I threw a roll of Colorplus on a point and shoot I bought purely just to test it, to make sure it was working. I just went over to like a local area. And again, overcast day, these come across so much nicer, the greens so much cooler. And yeah, I enjoy this look quite a bit, even though these images are quite random. And then I just threw this one in at the end. This is like some filtered sunlight. This looks pretty good as well, not super punchy. But to go into 100% here, just to check out detail, considering it's like an older consumer 200 speed film stock, I actually think it looks pretty good. The grain isn't too harsh. Not perfect by any means, but it holds up pretty well. Yeah, this almost has like a more muted look. But I guess for me, that's the whole point of using something like this. Like I said, typically I'm using medium format or large format, and I'm using portraits or, finer grain films. And I love the idea of switching it up completely and going and getting an older emulsion, something that's like a consumer film, and even throwing it in a point and shoot and just embracing this like unique look or the limitations of it. And certainly with scenes like this, the results that I got, I was very happy with. So yeah, overall fun to get out, shoot some more of this in some different kind of scenarios, and something I'll certainly use moving forward. Like I said, maybe for some of these long distance hikes, but would love to hear from you. If you've shot Colorplus, what's your experience been like? What do you think? I think everyone's experience is going to be a little bit different because we're all working with this differently after scanning and editing and stuff. But yeah, would love to hear some other opinions on what your results were. But anyways, that's it for this one. Hope you enjoyed this video, this look at Colorplus. And as always, thank you for watching. I'll talk to you soon.